Welcome to my podcast. I'm sitting in the morning room in the castle, and my guest today is a wonderful person, Laura Tobin, meteorologist, so we can talk about the weather. She was a physicist. My God, that has me in such awe. And she's just written an amazing book about everyday ways that we can save the planet. Thank you, Laura. Welcome to Highclere Castle. It's not your first time here is either.
No, I think I've been here about 4 times. So I am the weather presenter on Good Morning Britain every single morning on national telly, telling people the thing they want to know the most talked about topic in the UK, the weather. And we've been here, I think, for when a movie was launched, for I think probably the beginning of the last series and then the end of the last series. I've been here in costume, in car, Christmas specials. So yeah, it felt like, I know it's not my home, but it felt like coming home when I drove up the drive. So yeah, it's so nice to be back.
Well, it's lovely, lovely to welcome you. And I first of all want to say I've really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Because it's simple. It's simple to read, to dip into, to understand. And it's, how we can save this extraordinarily beautiful planet, this beautiful world, what we're doing to it, why we must stop, and the everyday ways that every single one of us can do, what we can change about ourselves, will be how we can save the planet for the future. I think it's a really fun book. So again, it was everyday ways to save the planet. 200 plus, in fact.
It was going to be called 101 Ways to Save the Planet, and then it was 120, then 150, and 180, and I said to the publishers, we need a new name. So it's 200 plus ideas, yeah.
But I'm in August. You actually studied at university at Reading, which is not so very far from Highclere. It's probably about 20 miles east of here. It's a great university, and that's where you studied physics, if I'm right, and
yes.
meteorology.
Yeah, physics and meteorology.
Amazing.
So do you know the story about how I fell in love with the weather?
How did you fall in love with the weather?
So I was 14 and my geography, so I always loved science. I've always been quite a sciencey girl. And my geography teacher said, right, we're going to be doing a topic on the weather. We're going to learn about the jet stream. And he said, I want the girls to line up in a straight line, and next to you, the boys to line up in a straight line. And I want you to run to the other side of the classroom, but pushing into each other and see what happens. By the time we got to the other side of the classroom, we were all in a wiggly line. We weren't straight anymore. And he said, that is the jet stream. It's warm air from the equator pushing up, it's cold air from the Arctic pushing south, and it's this battle zone between the two pushing up and down that makes weather fronts, that makes weather patterns across the UK, and that's why our weather's so changeable. And that moment at 14, I said, I want to be a weather forecaster. And I phoned the Met Office that day and said, what do I do? What GCSEs, what A-levels, and what degree? And so then my path was set.
Goodness me, I had no idea what I wanted to do, to study, or to be, and I'm not sure I know now.
There's still time.
There's still time, which is fine. But and I think the weather is such a topic of conversation. Every single day we get up and I look out and think, what's the weather going to be today? And on the news, first thing in the morning, that's what I want to know. I think there's a line in Downton Abbey about, I think Violet and Cora are talking about the weather, and Cora wonders the history of this country, which defines us as who we are. And Violet, of course, replies, I think we need to blame the weather. That makes us who we are.
Always blame the weather.
So it's back to that. And the uncertainty, every event here is defined by what might the weather be like, whether it's an Easter egg hunt, which you must come to, or an event in the summer, whether it's concerts or anything else. Yeah. What's the weather going to be like?
I got married on Friday the 13th. Even I couldn't sort the weather out that day. It rained.
That's supposed to be lucky, though.
Yeah, I know. They say it's lucky. And people often say, oh, I have a barbecue coming up. Is the weather going to be nice? Or I have a party coming up. Which day should I choose this weekend? And I say to people, you get one request a year. Use it wisely. And sometimes they'll go away and then come back with a different day. I don't have that power. Just saying now, I actually can't give you your one day of weather. I couldn't do it for myself.
But I think you're between a physicist and a seer, trying to be both sides of it. So you spent 3 years studying all the weather patterns, and then I gather you went to the Met Office as the next and the first stage in your career?
Yeah, so then my very first thing to do when I qualified, when I passed university, was to become a meteorologist. So I had my degree in physics and meteorology, which was great, and then you can go into all different routes. But for me, I wanted to look at the skies. So I went to RAF Bryce Norton, which is also not too far from here. And I had a house in Swindon, which isn't too far from here. And one of my friends was at Benson, which is
not too far from
and
here.
then the other one was at Lynham, which is obviously now a closed RAF base. So we all had different aircraft doing different sorties, and mine at Bryce were the crew that flew troops and cargo all over the world. So they fly to Canada, they would fly to Ascension and then to the Falklands, they'd fly to Cyprus and to Iraq and to Basra. So the very first job I had with the Met Office was learning about world weather and learning about heat stress indexes and learning about sandstorms and humidity so aircraft can take off. So it was all about the severe side of weather and weather forecasting, cloud bases, visibilities, and then also a place next to Oxford, Weston on the Green, where they do parachute jumping. So very small scale, detailed weather forecasts. So I learned so much in a really short space of time, but I absolutely loved it.
And how did you step forward into presenting for television channels?
So I said I would never present on TV. I said I never wanted to be on telly.
Never wanted to be a weather girl?
No, never. Because that's what people say. You're a girl doing meteorology, well, surely you're going to be a weather girl. And I was thinking, I didn't study physics. One of the hardest things you can study, to just stand at a screen and point and, look pretty. But then there was a job going. So the Met Office had forecasters at RAF bases, army bases, places like Heathrow Airport, and also at the BBC Weather Centre. And there was a job for a lady, lots of the ladies that gone off to have babies. And my boss said, look, never say never. Just give it a go. Go, see what it's all about, see if you can just learn extra skills. It's really important to always learn something new. Yeah. So I thought, okay, fine, I will. And actually, I was annoyed with myself for loving it so much. I got to sit on the forecaster bench and be in charge of the output with the producers and talk to all the regions so that the information given by everybody is consistent. That's the most important thing. Then when people watch the weather, they need to be able to change channels and change regions and still have the same message.
Did I just look at different reports on Google
to see the one that you wanted to be.
Anyway, okay, so
and that's what people do.
Trying to stop me
We're trying to make
that.
it just for one forecast. And then thinking about the BBC audience, it was everything from Radio 1, very, very young audience, to Radio 4, an older audience, where you did the shipping forecast, which is the pinnacle of
I love
radio.
That. I listened to it.
Do you want to blast? It's now time for the shipping forecast issued at 05:05 on Thursday the 6th of September 2016. There are warnings of gales in Viking, North at Zera, South at Zera, Chromatis 4th, Tyne and Dogger.
But I work my way around the country. Yeah. I learn a lot from it.
And so the funny thing about the shipping forecast is it's meant to be for people who are going out on boats, but people right across the country, even inland, used to listen to it. Yeah. And it was 9 minutes long exactly. You had to mark your scripts up. It was the last thing you did on a night shift. It was the most challenging but the most exciting thing that you did, working with, the continuity announcers from Radio 4, who are the best in the business. And as soon as you finished, if you finished on 0, you felt like a rock star and a superhero. So I got to do that. And then you had online, interactive, BBC World, you had the British Forces broadcasting, you had BBC at 1 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news. So as soon as I got there, I just thought I was so silly to be so disillusioned to the fact that they turn up, have a bit of hair and makeup, point at a screen and leave. It was so much more involved than I thought. And I stayed for 5 years and loved it. So it just happened, which was amazing.
How extraordinary. Yes, I think there is a huge amount to it. And I love that shipping forecast. I don't know why. I think it's because I feel safe at bed. But I grew up, much of my time was in Cornwall as children. And you were very well aware of the sea because you heard it at night. And you were very much aware of the fishermen going out, for whom all information was absolutely vital and a matter of life and death.
Yeah, and Cornwall's like its own microclimate. It's just so much sunnier, warmer than the rest of the UK. And the plants that grow there are amazing.
They are simply amazing. And then from that, moving on from your career as a meteorologist, which I could go on about, I do want to bring up your book, because I picked it up and I thought, what I think we're all faced with in the world is the fact of climate change. And I hope that more people now are accepting it exists and we are reacting to it somewhat behind the curve, but we nevertheless need to react to it quite quickly and to make a move on it. And all of us wonder, what can we do? And your book makes so many suggestions. So, to start with, you define that we contribute to the problems of our climate through travel, through our houses, through what we eat. Those were the three main divisions that I saw of everyday life. Is there another one that I've missed?
No, but those three are 75% of all of our emissions. So
and
3/4, that's
three-quarters of it. And in terms of the house, what made me laugh was the fact that obviously you can turn the lights off, which helps. And I've got LEDs
that makes
throughout the castle because it draws 6% instead of 60 watts. It draws so much less, so I'm saving a huge amount. But also I remember from childhood, I'm one of 6 girls.
Oh, wow.
And our father used to come in, and even if we're in the blooming room, he'd turn the lights off. So there'd be squawks from us as we're trying to put lipstick or mascara on. And suddenly you're pinged into darkness.
Yes.
Because he was saving electricity. And Geordie's grandfather used to, after supper, turn all the lights off in this castle to save money.
No.
This was in the 50s.
Amazing.
And then the butler used to appear with a silver tray full of torches so you could find your way to bed, which is completely
Oh my goodness,
bizarre.
if my husband is listening to this, you are giving him all kinds of ideas, seriously.
But it's just, again, some of how I was brought up, I suppose, in windy houses in Cornwall, and a father who was conscious of our electric bills and our telephone bills and our heating bills, which was minimal.
Yeah.
And, we had hot water bottles instead of central heating. In some ways, it's going back to some of those thoroughly sensible protocols to live today. And over to you, but I can't. You had so many sensible suggestions about how to live and save money through living better in our homes. So do you want to share some of your...
Well, I think everything you said there is correct and it makes so much sense. And I think the big thing is, and I'll kind of go backwards and forwards because that's me. Last year, I went on a trip to Svalbard. It's a tiny island, a little archipelago north of Norway, between Norway and the North Pole. We went to look at climate change there. It's warming faster than anywhere else on planet Earth, nearly 6 times faster. So because of that, the effects are so much more dramatic than anywhere else. So I went and I met this lovely guide, and he'd arrived 40 years ago, and I turned 40 when I was there. And so he took me to a rocky bit of land near nothing, and I could see the sea. And he said, where I'm standing now with you is where the glacier used to end. He said, look up the hill. And we looked up the hill. Over half a mile, we could barely see the end of the glacier. And he said, that's how far it's retreated in my lifetime, in the 40 years he'd been there. And I thought, gosh, that's crazy. And he said, look up. And it was 10 metres above our heads as well, all the way up. So that whole volume of ice had gone and lost to the sea. And that happened to every glacier for the whole of Svalbard, pretty much across the whole of the Arctic. We then spoke to another tour guide who said that there was an ice fjord there, and the ice fjord doesn't freeze over anymore in the winter. And one year, in 2017, he had to just phone all of his customers and say, we can't go sledging, we can't go snowmobiling, we can't go out on the ice. There is no ice. And he had no business for 2 years, and he had to come up with a new plan of action. And then we found out that the polar bears are dying in droves because the waters around there should be Arctic waters, but it's warming, and now Atlantic water's coming up, and Atlantic water and Arctic water, different properties, different fish. So they haven't got the fish they need, they're trying to swim further, they haven't got enough energy, they're dying. And then we found out that it rains more than snows, and reindeer can scoop through the snow and get all their food they want. But when it rains, it freezes, and they can't break through the ice. So they're dying. So my point was, I went there, that just as I was writing the book, knowing that I think, like you said, we all realise climate change is happening. We don't need to explain that really much anymore. And yes, it's because we overheating our planet. It's wrapped in a blanket of pollution, it's heating. And I thought I knew the science. We discussed whether we should go. Should I fly on a plane with emissions to somewhere far away? I know the science, I've read the cryosphere reports, but I went and saw it with my eyes, and I felt it with my heart. I saw the landscape changing. I saw people's lives and the tourism changing. I saw what's happening to the wildlife. And I left actually feeling really traumatized because they hardly admit anything. And what happens in the Arctic affects the ice, and the ice melting affects the jet stream, and then that affects weather patterns across the UK and across Europe. It makes us more likely to have heat waves and extremes. Even though the Arctic feels so far away, the impacts are so close to home. So that kind of was a real turning point for me to say, I have to do something. I have a daughter who's 5. I actually missed her first day and her first whole week at school to go on this trip. That's how important it was for me, and I explained that to her. And she drew a little note for me to take to the polar bears to say, I'm sorry that we're heating our planet and you're losing your ice. And I just thought, I want her to visit when she's my age, and I want the glaciers to still be there. That the rate we're heading, there'll be no glaciers or polar bears or no reindeer. And actually that's really upsetting. So I want to say to her, we did everything we could to protect everything that we have now. And I think that's the thing that people want to know. What can I do, and will it make a difference? And so that's why we did the book, and it was like lots and yes. And like you said, heating our homes, how we travel, what we eat are the 75% of the emissions. But all of those we can save money. I don't think I realised until I started researching, it's really obvious that people waste food. But do we really think about how much food we waste? All of the food that we waste every year is 10% of all the world's emissions. Flying is 2.5% of the world's emissions. So 4 times everyone's flying is food that we just throw away. And that costs us money. That is something that we could think about and do for free. On average, we throw away around about 6 meals in the UK every week. We could think about freezing those meals. Just buy what you need, planning your meals. How often do you go to the fridge and think, I've got no food, or I need to get something out the freezer? Or, planning your meals is really important. And then also any food scraps that you have, and for us it's, eggshells and peelings and all of those sort of things, don't put them in the bin. It feels like that's an obvious thing to do. And I think lots of councils are starting to provide food waste bins. As some people think it's not very clean, but they get taken away every week. If you put food into a bin, it produces methane. And methane is 30 times more warming than carbon dioxide. It's so much worse. But if you put it into your food waste bin, it gets turned into compost and it can be reused again. So food waste for me, I didn't have a food waste bin, was the easiest thing to tackle. So we now recycle all of our food, turn it into compost, and then we have no scraps. And people think they have no scraps. Like, we have no scraps, and we use all of our food, and we started having veg boxes as well. We realised that we ate a lot of meat, so now I eat no red meat. I only eat chicken and fish. Some people say, shouldn't you be vegan if you really, really cared about the planet? But I think you have to make choices, and you have to do what you can.
Well, the thing about that is we're a farm here.
Yeah.
I've written a book to tackle climate change from a different point of view called Seasons at Highclere, looking about how we eat, how we can grow well, garden well, and cook well, and cooking from scratch using what we have in front of us. And part of that is we have 1,800 sheep here.
Amazing.
And 60 rams. But they're fertilising at the park. They graze over stubble turnips, which we then plant with spring barley. So you can either, the fertiliser, which otherwise we need to grow the crops, such as the wheat, which you eat if you're vegan, vegetarian, or eat meat, needs fertiliser, which comes from the chemical process businesses, the offshoots, obviously, as you know. And in some ways, by keeping animals naturally, you help fertilise it. What I disagree with is keeping animals penned up in great big indoor houses, which happens. So it's a factory, not a farm. So it's about farms, not factories. It's about interrelated growing. And there's been a farm here for, well, obviously 1,000 years or more. And we're just trying to do it well in that kind of fashion. So we've always eaten a lot of vegetables and crops, but we eat some meat, but every so often, because actually it's more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's a treat, which I think is kind of where it used to be.
Yes.
Which is a heck of a lot better than just eating processed meats the whole time.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's the health benefits as well, isn't it? And I think, yes, less meat, more vegetables. I think the savings for the NHS is millions of pounds every year for your cardiovascular diseases.
Yes.
And if you have more meat and you have better quality meat and more vegetables, then the price is way out. So it doesn't cost you any more money.
No, it doesn't. And, I thoroughly enjoy it. And again, because I'm one of 6 girls, my mother always had a meal, plan of what we were eating.
Superstar.
So that it was sorted. And also I, as a working mum, I've got a couple of stepchildren as well as my son. And when I was working, I needed to have a plan of what we were going to eat. And that actually is such a help. So, it's spaghetti bolognese on one day, or it's a fish pie on another day. And you've got the main meal running through. And then around that, you can build the balance.
Yeah, and you have your chicken, and the next day your chicken curry.
I do, and then I have my potato, and then my rice, and then my pasta, or the couscous, or whatever else I'm doing. And that's, I think, if you plan, it's much less expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually possible. And we have and funny enough, one of the positive things from COVID for Highclere in terms of offering food is that often with the tours, we offer food, we include it, because cooking food is the heart of any home.
Yes.
But because you couldn't choose what you wanted, we prepare a plate of food per person with a choice of different things on it. So there's no wastage.
Yes.
So there's nothing left over.
That's a much
so instead
better
of
idea.
choosing the food, it's there. So it's extraordinary. So all of us in the estate office, the castle office, used to have quite rich pickings when everyone had gone, and now there's nothing. There wasn't even any soup left over for me the other day. It all gone. But that's kind of makes me feel real good because there's nothing left over. So.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are sensible things, but part of it was turning the heating down, which you and your husband are clearly very keen on.
Oh my goodness. So I mean, half of the reason to write the book was just to tell people how tight my husband was. And I wrote the entire book, and at the very end did he find this out, because I said to him, you're in my thank yous. And it says, you're the loveliest person on the planet, but the tightest person as well. And do you know what he said? I'm not the loveliest person on the planet. He wasn't so bothered about the tightest bit. I mean, he is. So many things that we already did. All of our light bulbs are changed. We turn everything off at the wall every single night. Only plugs are on that need to be absolutely on. We've always been really careful with our food. And but the heating is the big one. He won't allow our heating over 20 degrees Celsius. And if it's over it, he actually gets quite cross. And when we leave the house, the thermostat just gets turned down to, say, 14. So technically it's off. So you come into a freezing cold house and it takes a while for everything to heat back up again. And we had a friend visiting once, so we all arrived. Friend went into the living room, we went to the kitchen to make our drinks. And we went back into the living room and he was doing star jumps to warm up. And at that point I said to Dean, look, this is how cold our house is, okay? So our heating sits at around about 18 when it's needed, not very often. And actually it is a bit of a joke, but right now with the cost of energy, our energy bills are much higher, but it's saving us a lot of money. And if you just lower your thermostat by 1 degree, that's 10% saving on your energy bills. So that's huge. And it's just a tiny thing to do. And all those things like closing your curtains in the evening, when the sun sets, keeping the heat in that you've paid for during the day. We've insulated all of our walls. We've insulated our roof. I had to go up in ski gear, goggles and gloves the other day to put another bit of foam on the top of my daughter's bedroom to make sure it was warm. We've got those blackout blinds, and actually we are getting new windows fitted next month, so practice what I preach. I think that 25% of your heat escapes through the walls, 25% through the roof, and 25% through your ceilings. And actually the cost that it would be for us to do our windows would have repaid itself within about 2 years now with the cost of the energy bills. So it costs money, but then again, you will save money. And this is the big thing. It costs, but then you save.
I completely agree. And we rent out cottages here. And the first thing is that I work on is all the insulation to make sure it's really thick insulation, which helps. We can't always insulate the walls because they're listed or old houses. And then I work my way around the windows. I play Monopoly with the windows. But when they're double glazed, it makes a huge difference. And some of the cottages where I then put interlined curtains, which actually I'm buying off eBay. Can I say that? I'm buying them off eBay. You just did. And then redoing them and just lengthening them, and then painting around it. But if you have good curtains. And you have, it's well insulated in the daytime, it works well in the daytime, then it's okay at night. And then I have happy tenants who never leave. Some of our tenants have been here for 20 years.
Amazing.
And they're such amazing people. And we haven't found all the answers in terms of, heat exchange, boiler system,
the new air source heat pumps.
Air source heat pumps.
Yeah.
They don't always work in every way, but whenever I'm putting something in, I'm trying to look at what can be adapted to whatever's going to be coming online. So I think that's the best way to go forward. But in the meantime, people need to stay warm, and I'm putting it in, so I need to be able to afford to put things in. And people are going to use it less because it's expensive. So in some ways, we are, I think, using less resource and less electricity and less food, as all those prices have skyrocketed.
And exactly as you said, I think the whole thing I realised about the whole book and everything, your whole way of life, and it blew my mind at first, is there used to be reduce, reuse, recycle. I might need to consult my book, but there's now 7 steps. And the first thing is just to rethink.
Yes.
Everything you do, everything you buy, whether it's a holiday, whether it's a car, whether it's a new item of clothing, I need a new phone cover. Can it be bought in a green way? Is it made of recycled products? There's a way to rethink the way we do everything. And then the next step feels like a really weird one. It's refuse. So I don't drink hot drinks, but if we're ever on location in the weather and it's really cold in the morning, I might have a cup of tea just to keep warm. But if I haven't taken my reusable cup, I will just point blank refuse to have a takeaway cup. Yes, they may say it can be composted or recycled, but that still takes energy. And we need to be in a world of a circular economy. You have something, you wash it, you use it again, and it's just purchased one time and it will never go into a landfill. And that's your recyclable, reusable thing.
That's what used to happen. This is also new, this
I know.
takeaway economy. And everyone used to sit down to eat together, just like in Downton Abbey, not walk on the hoofs. If you're not sitting at a table, should you be eating or drinking? So I think it's kind of things like that. I thought travel was interesting, and I find that, again, because of COVID and going to the supermarket was such a palaver, that I definitely go far less.
Yes.
And again, with spiralling costs, it's, do I actually need it?
Yeah.
And when my trousers have got a hole in, I'll probably buy a new pair. But other than that, because you were making the point about we wear 20% of our wardrobe and 80% stays at the back.
Yes.
And I think I've got a lot of wardrobe to work through. So.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I'm trying to buy no new clothes, because I realise I can just shop in my wardrobe, or I can buy secondhand clothes so that it's new to me, but they're not new. And I realise it's not that difficult because I have lots of clothes and lots of shoes that I've had for a really long time in my wardrobe that I hardly wear. So, and the fashion industry is another one of those big chunks. 10% of the world's emissions are from fashion. So you're better off buying fewer really beautiful products that are really nicely made with lovely fabrics that will last so much longer than lots and lots of fast fashion, which will fall apart and go out of fashion.
I completely understand that, but having said that, I think many of the people in poorer parts of the world earn their money and their livelihood by making throwaway fashionable garments or better made fashion garments. So again, I think there needs to be a rethink in turning their attention to planting trees and turning their countries into conservation
and making it fair and fair pay. And that's the thing. You don't want to stop buying everything, so nobody has a job. But if everything was fair and everyone was paid better, then it would all be distributed out evenly. And that's, there's these pillars of society that we can, if we tackle climate change, if we tackle poverty, if we tackle educating young women, if we tackle looking after water resources, all of these things are interlinked. So if we can educate women so they can go out and get jobs and look after their families and then become farmers and then have a fewer children, and then the women don't get married as young, and then that continues in this positive spiral of being more empowered, and then they can have solar panels and they can have wind turbines and not rely on fossil fuels. This all produces a lower population and lower carbon footprint as well.
Yes, I think it has the point that I suppose I've made to those people who aren't so keen on believing in climate change is that I think the climate of this world has never changed so fast as it has in the last 100 years. And that's what the animals, the wildlife. I think you said that 1 out of 8 million of the wildlife of 8 million different breeds or genetics, 1 million are now under threat.
Yes, of extinction.
Which
is terrifying, yes.
Which is huge.
And part of that is because of where we build our houses, and it blocks paths for them to get from one area they live to another to be able to populate themselves. So we're cutting off those paths. Another is the changing the temperatures, the changing in the water, and them having to migrate to other places and not having the areas that they need to be able to thrive. So yeah, and then all of that will lead to them getting closer to human populations, which means they're more likely to bring diseases, which means we're much more likely to have more zoonosis and more pandemics. Yeah. I know.
I think your facts about the sea were quite scary to me as well, because I hadn't probably contemplated how big a sink of carbon dioxide the sea was.
Yes.
But if it warms up, it's less efficient, which is far more worrying, and it's also full of our plastic.
Yeah, exactly. So 70% of the Earth's surface is ocean, and I guess it's obvious when you think about it, looking at the globe and how much water there is, particularly the large expanse between the UK and the United States. But the oceans absorb 90% of the heat that we produce. So we have a lot to thank the oceans for. Otherwise, the atmosphere would be so much hotter, but they're slowly starting to be able to store that heat a little bit less efficiently, not quite storing as much, which means they'll soon be at capacity and not be able to store it. They also absorb loads of carbon dioxide, and soon the warmer they get, they won't be able to absorb as much carbon dioxide. And then they change their acidity, which is affecting marine life and also affecting things like the corals. And we talk about how we want to limit our warming to 1.5 degrees. What does that even mean? Why does 1.5 degrees matter? So this is something I learned about a little while ago. I saw a TED talk and I found it really fascinating. And they were saying that the Earth is warmed by just over 1 degree. And you think 1 degree, that's not much. You know, the temperature in the UK yesterday went from like -5 to +15. That's 20 degrees change. So why does 1 degree matter? But it's the average temperature for the whole planet for the whole year, just given one figure. So it's risen by over a degree since the Industrial Revolution. And like you say, it's how rapidly it's warmed. But if we, as a human, warmed by 1 degree, go from 37 to 38, we start to feel quite unwell, and we would need to rest, take some medicine to recuperate, and Earth can't rest, and we aren't giving it the medicine. But if we try to limit our warming to, say, 1.5 or 2 degrees, that's what we want to aim for. At the moment, we're on track for 3 degrees of warming. If we warmed 3 degrees to 40 degrees Celsius, we would be on our deathbed. We would be gravely ill. We would have to go to hospital. We'd have to have medical intervention. And I think that's where I see that's where we are with the planet now. We're the doctors. It can't rest, but we can give it the medicine it needs, and to help to alleviate some of that pressure, to stop it warming to the 1.5 to 3 degrees. And with coral, 1.5 degrees of warming mean we lose 70%. 2 degrees of warming means we lose 99%. So that's why every tiny bit of warming matters, because every tiny bit more, it's more cataclysmic.
Which is very sobering, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. And yeah, I look back and we criticise our predecessors for what they've done to each other or to the world, but I think otherwise our successors are going to look back and think, you've missed the boat.
Yes.
Because we should be acting now. So that's in a sense why, having absorbed all that you've said, and there are some frightening statistics as well, which are important to understand, but what you do give me when I read your book is you give me hope.
Good.
That I can do small things or continue to turn the lights off, preferably when someone's in the room, to save a little bit of electricity here. And if we all made these small adjustments, it would make the most enormous difference. And I also think the politics needs to step aside from it, because it is a global emergency, not a political emergency. And just to correct, because I know, for example, one of the problems is soy and the plantations of soy in places like Brazil, and the soy then both feeds us in soya milk and the cattle in America, and that's what's cutting down much of the Amazon.
Yeah, and palm oil is similar.
And the similar thing with those two particular aspects which are in so much of our ingredients today. But if you don't buy processed food, if you don't buy processed food, then you don't have palm oil in it. And if you don't buy some of the fast food which needs the soy-based meat, you then have less need for it, so less need to cut it down. So we have all got to change our behaviour just a little.
Exactly, and that will make you healthier, because the alternate options of eating are so much healthier. And that's exactly it. It's, I'm not here to say you should never travel on a plane, you should never eat meat, and you should not heat your home or have a car. the UK is so diverse and amazing and wonderful because people have travelled, but travel less. Travel once a year, travel economy. We have one car, and this evening my husband's having to take my daughter on a bike to drama because I have the car. We have to kind of make sure that you just make that little bit of effort to make changes. But I think the big thing for me is I started making little changes, and the more smaller changes I made, the medium changes I would make. And now I feel like I'm in this medium stage where I'm ready to start to make the bigger changes. So next time we get a new heating system, it will be an air source heat pump. Our car's just passed its MOT, but if it hadn't, we said that we would be buying an electric car. I'm not going to get rid of my diesel car, even though diesel is bad, just because electric will be better, because it took a footprint of carbon to make that car.
Precisely.
You keep things until they're on their deathbed, fix, and when they're gone, and then you buy a greener option. And I think that's really important. Don't just get something because you should. I emptied all of my wardrobe of all of those tiny little shampoo bottles that are so exciting to get from when you go to hotels. I don't even know why. And I will never ever collect a miniature bottle ever again. And now I have shampoo bars and shampoo bottles, and my bathroom is completely plastic free. And that was a big step. It took a while to get there. 40% of the rubbish in landfill is just plastic from our bathrooms that probably we could recycle. We are terrible at recycling. So I have like a little diagram in different sections of my book saying, just first of all, just recycle what you have, and make sure you do that first of all. But we shouldn't even be recycling. We should be, like I said, in the circular economy. But some things are unavoidable. But actually, at my daughter's school, they're becoming a green school, and there's this great company called TerraCycle who recycle things that can't be recycled. So we have our curbside recycling that take all of the big things that's cost effective to recycle, but crisp packets, bread bags, sweet wrappers, they can't be recycled. But this company called TerraCycle will take them and recycle them and turn them into new products. So my school are getting new bins for all those things, and I have millions of bags in my garage full of all different things that curbside recycling won't recycle, but I can take to school or take to different shops or different supermarkets and stop going from into landfill. So, that's millions and millions of products every year that aren't going to landfill. So that's, a big deal.
It is a big deal. Laura, thank you so much. I hope I am a little bit on the way.
You're very much on your way.
What you're doing. But and it does matter enormously here. We're a farm, and I'm proud of it. We try to recycle, reuse, cook from scratch, cook within the seasons, and be very careful with the resources. And I think the word sustainable, somebody said to me the other day that they were trying to, they wanted to live sustainably. And it's not just about us living sustainably. It's about wildlife and nature. It's providing an environment where they can actually survive, because that is what is so key now. And going around here, quietly walking or going on horseback, you can find so much and so much beauty. But anyway, I could talk to you for hours.
I know.
But I'm going to stop and just say thank you so, so much for joining me here today at Highclere.
Thank you.
I hope there'll be other opportunities which we can share in forums or gathering people together, because I'm sure it's going to be the top of so many people's agendas. So good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. And I would love to hear all of the little changes that people are making that they pass on to another friend and another friend. But the biggest thing to tackle climate change is talk about it. So we're talking about it, and I hope people continue that conversation.
And then do. I like people doing too.
Yes, do too.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. Hello, this is Lady Carnarvon, and just to say, please do subscribe to this podcast. Then you can be first on the list every time it comes out.